Andy Burnham seems happy to talk about pubs and shops, but what is his attitude to larger firms? Is he truly pro-business?
Well, you haven't heard a lot of politicians take office and say, I'm going to be an anti-business prime minister. So I would say at this point, the words don't mean much. I do wonder, some of the other, catchphrases we've heard in recent days, the last couple of weeks have been, we need to ask people, businesses, for just a little bit more to make things a little bit fairer. I sort of wonder what that is code word for. I wonder what he means when he says he's going to be asking for a little bit more, and is he actually going to be asking businesses and some workers for what they would think is a lot more, and then how that clashes or doesn't clash with him being seen as pro-business.
Okay. Do you expect significant tax increases then in the budget? Do you expect land value tax, wealth taxes to come? It's obviously early days. Today is just the kind of transition day, but surely most people will be thinking about that first budget that he's going to deliver.
I would expect some tinkerings on the margin in terms of tax come budget times. I wouldn't expect anything major. So because he has said he's going to stick to the manifesto promises, that precludes him, if he's going to actually stick to that precludes him from doing anything on the big taxes in the UK. So then the question is, how far is he going to go in terms of smaller taxes and trying to get more money that way? I think a big test in that will be, I'm sure the Prime Minister knows that if he tries having any unfunded increases in expenditures, that there will be a very negative market reaction to that. But what I think is a bigger question is, to what extent are markets going to tolerate tax rises on paper, which might sort of hypothetically fix the fiscal arithmetic and work, but in practice, are they going to be so damaging to growth that you're not actually going to see enough economic activity to see any of those tax rises? But from what we've seen, it seems like there will be some sort of tinkering with some of the smaller taxes.
How important is the choice of Chancellor going to be to perceptions of that policy as well? Shabana Mahmood, widely seen as a wise choice, reported as being in the lead for that position, but she has no experience in economics or running a business.
Well, it is a little bit funny, isn't it, that somebody who we know nothing about her stance on economics, and isn't it sort of funny that that's seen as the sort of the safe pair of hands, the pro-stability, market-favored choice, and I can see why. It's because the other name that has been floated previously was Ed Miliband, and I think there are some questions there around would that have been a more ideologically driven chancellor. So in terms of who is going to make the Prime Minister's life easier in the immediate aftermath between now and the budget, that definitely will be Shabana Mahmood, which is why I think it's almost a guarantee, why a lot of people think it's almost a guarantee that that's the name we're going to hear imminently today, in a sense that otherwise markets would have been expecting more spending, more inflation, higher interest rates, and then that would have made that fiscal calculation, the fiscal headroom, and the assumptions with which OBR would have been working with all the more challenging. So I think, to your original question, how important are the optics? They're clearly incredibly important. I think that is the main reason that he's gone for this, that he's probably gone for this choice of Chancellor. It's optics and market perception.
I think it's really interesting the way that you're speaking to me. This does not sound very positive or hopeful. This is has been Andy Burnham, one of the most popular politicians in the UK recently. And I note, for example, I was reading our opinion columnist Rosa Prince, who's got great, interesting views a lot of the time. She says that Andy Burnham has a shot at greatness. And it does feel like the UK, after these 10 years of frankly, a lot of chaos politically and a huge economic issue with, stagnant growth and stagnant wages and a cost of living crisis, that maybe we are at a tipping point where we do need somebody quite radical to come in and actually try to improve things. It doesn't sound like you're enormously optimistic that Burnham could be that figure.
I think there are some if we were to think optimistically, some of what he has said, I think in the longer term, a few years down the line, actually has real chances of improving the economic picture. So he has been talking a lot about devolution, and he's not the first to talk about devolution. You've had leveling up, you've had the Northern Powerhouse, but what he is talking about at least suggests that he would go further. And I think if you give local areas the power not only to be in charge of their own spending, but to retain more of the locally generated revenues, that's what's going to make the difference in terms of evolution. Otherwise, if you just have one central pot and local politicians are always just pulling from that pot, that does not create the right incentives. If you have more power to actually make things happen in your local area, you're going to be naturally more inclined to say no to NIMBYism, to look for efficiencies. If you can make that happen, I think that's an area that has real potential, but that is a win that's years down the line. Yeah. And I think there has been this cycle in the UK of having immediate expectations from politicians to turn things around in what is a very difficult situation. Economic growth is sort of grazing 1%. There's demographic challenges. Inflation is proving difficult. It's a lot of challenges. People expect results on day one. That then creates very, very short-term incentives for politicians who try sort of pulling small pots of money, small strings, without really seeing the bigger picture. So, in the new Prime Minister's words, let's look to the future with optimism. I think optimism needs to be justified. So I would like to be as optimistic as I can. But I mean, the country is in a difficult position.